This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everyone. This is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. And we're not quite into the new year yet, as this podcast episode is being released here on December 31st, the last day of 2020. And we can finally put a lid on this stinker. This has been quite some year. Who would have known coming into this year that the word of the year would be Zoom? When I go back and watch the old movie of The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman, and when they said that there's one word I want to give you, son, plastics, the word this year would have been Zoom. Boy, everybody has been doing that, and anyhow, this has been the year of the digital type of listening to and watching magic and learning magic, and it's just been one incredible year. And this coming year, we have a lot of hope for the vaccine that's going to be coming in, and also that we can start to return to some level of normalcy. And in that regard, in fact, I happened to be talking recently with Max Maven, and as you know, he is internationally renowned as not only a magician but a mentalist, and part of what a mentalist does is to predict things. And so I asked him about what his thoughts are on 2021 regarding this virus, and when he thinks we're going to be getting out of it. And basically, give me your predictions, Max, on what you think is going to be happening here this coming year. So that was the question. Let's hear what he had to say.
Well, oddly enough, despite how terrible this past year has been, I have reason to be somewhat optimistic about where this is all going. It's going to take a while. It's not going to turn around quickly. We live, unfortunately, in an age of instant gratification. If you want to know something, you punch a couple of buttons on your phone or on your computer, and you have access to all the libraries of the world, basically. If you want a product, you order it online, it can be delivered the next day. So we've become very used to this idea that when we want something, it'll happen instantly, or pretty close to instantly. The changes that are starting to take place right now, in terms of this pandemic, are not going to happen very quickly. Mm-hmm. We need to be patient. They are just now rolling out these vaccines. It's going to take a while for the vaccines to reach enough people. It's my understanding from some things that I've read. Obviously, it's not going to reach every person, partly because there are people who will be stubborn and say, I don't want to take the vaccine, and others who are not able to get it because the distribution chains are so complicated and vast. But eventually, enough people, and that's apparently something that could be as low as 50%,
of the world's population,
to break the pandemic, to not to completely eradicate the disease, but to stop it from spreading as pervasively as it does. Mm-hmm. Apparently, about 50% is the tipping point where it becomes manageable. And eventually, over time, we'll reach that, and slowly we'll be able to get back to something similar to what we had in 2019, where people will be able to congregate. It's going to be a long time before we stop wearing masks. It's going to be quite a while before we can effortlessly have physical contact, to come close together, congregate in small indoor facilities. But I think we will head in that direction, and it may take a year or two, maybe even longer. But with patience, I think we will come out the other side, most of us, and be back to something approximating normalcy. I will also add that one of the results of coming through this pandemic for those of us who are able to survive, to outlast it, I think there's going to be a blossoming of live entertainment. People are going to really miss that experience. We've all been sitting at home watching streaming movies and television and internet interactions, all of which will stay. They're not going anywhere. Zoom shows are not temporary. There will be Zoom shows from now until whenever the next huge change of media takes place. They are now a permanent part of the show business world. But live performing, once it becomes again possible, I think is going to have a renaissance. It's just going to be, people are going to be so eager for it. And I think the prospects are good.
So the audiences will just be really turning out for not only Broadway, but all Vegas and every place for live performances.
That's my prediction.
Yeah.
That's what.
How
really
soon do you think that'll be? Like June, July, or?
It's going to be a matter of a few years. Yeah. Again, I wish I could say I believe it's going to be instant gratification. It's not. It's going to take time. It's going to take time to deal with not only suppressing the spread of this deadly virus, but also altering some behavior habits on the part of the public, rethinking some things that were normal and making a new normal that is as close to possible as going back to the old normal, but hopefully an improved version. So again, I'm optimistic, not about how quickly it's going to happen, because I think it is going to take time, but I'm optimistic at what the eventual result is going to be. We have to learn to be a little more patient and work at a slightly slower pace.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's been done before, and we can do it.
Slow it back down. Good advice. Good prediction there then too. Well, I wish you safety and wellness and good health into the new year then as well, my friend.
Thank you, Scott, and I wish the very same to you and anyone who's listening.
Thank you very much. Well, there you have it from the Maven himself. Thank you, Max, very much for your thoughts on that, and let's hope for the best in this coming year. Well, this week we are going to be going to London to speak with Romany, who is an award-winning magician. She lived here in the U.S. and Las Vegas for a while, but resides currently over in England. And she has worked on cruise ships, done a lot of corporate events and everything then too. And I want to make sure that you hang around to the end of this podcast, because one of the things she's talking about towards the end of this discussion is a new book that she had written. I say new, it's been out for just a little while. But she is offering some ebooks as prizes. So if you wait until the end of this podcast, we'll give you some details on how that you can register and perhaps win a copy of her ebook. So there is a lot going on here this week, and so I don't want to take up any more of your time because I want to get right to the meat of it. So please welcome my guest this week, all the way from England, Romany. A lady with two first names, the Diva of Magic, here on The Magic Word. Well, today I've got with me a guest all the way from London, someone who is actually the first female who had won the Magic Circle Stage Award. She's also won the Lion's Head Award way back when they had the world's, Magic World Summit, I believe, or maybe it was anyhow, there was a Siegfried and Roy Award back when Joe Stevens was running that way back when in Vegas, and as well as being someone who has been working on cruise ships and television and every place around, and is a very well-known name, particularly in the UK, and needs to be more so over in the US. Had lived here for a while in Vegas as well. We're going to talk about that and some of the things that are in her most fascinating book called Spun Into Gold. Please welcome my guest, Miss Romany. Hello, Romany.
Hey, how are you?
Good. I don't know whether to call you Romany or Romany, since two first names and last names. What's up with that?
Well, so obviously I wasn't christened Romany.
Right, exactly.
Something normal. But I was at a clown class when I was 21. And, and also when I was a kid, I always wanted a different name. And when I watched a film, I would think, Isabella Rossellini, that's a good name. No, but of course that was already taken. So at 21, I was at this clown class and everyone was called Rainbow or Choo Choo or God knows what. And I was like, so I went home to my parents and I said, you got my name wrong. What is my name? And my father, who was very intuitive, he said, your name is Romany. And I immediately felt it was right. Romany, the traveling gypsy, the gypsy dancing in the forest. At that time,
But
I was
what made
working.
him come up with that name? And was that just out of the air, or I mean, that's an odd name. It's not like Sally or Jane or.
Right, but I think he felt that was my name. The Native American Indians, when young men coming into their power, they get a special name, which is like their character.
Right.
And it was a bit like that. And it certainly felt absolutely right. And then when I was 30, I still had my surname. And that to me symbolized that you had to get a good job and get a house and obey the rules. And I didn't want that either. Mm-hmm. And so I went to the lawyer and I said, I want to change my name. And she said, well, you can't just be called Romany. Mm-hmm. You have to have two names. So you should be Romany. And I was like, well, all right. But the funny thing is, I quite like it these days because it's quite memorable. And people just go, oh, look, it's Romany. Because it's funny, which I like.
I guess it's kind of like Little Caesars. It's pizza. So
right, Romany or Romany, and I think if changing your name was free, I'd do it to Romany.
Just keep it going, rolling off the tongue. That's right. Well, when Banachek had changed his name, likewise, he had his name legally changed as well. And I know that many places that you have to provide both the Christian and surname, and I remember on Facebook that he had to go as Banachek. So he'd have the first name as Ban and then middle initial A and then Check or something for him to actually create an account, because then Facebook, I don't know now whether it's changed, but years ago that he had to do something like that. Funny story as well that my father-in-law was Harry Don Charles Elliott, so he had two middle names. And so when he signed up for the Navy, that they only had room back in the 40s or whenever it was for one middle name. No one had two middle names, so choose one, basically. And it wasn't just him, but it's also he was the oldest of 9 children in the family, and they all had 4 names. So it was kind of funny. I'm sorry, kind of got off on a tangent over there. So yeah, you were now, but were you a Romany? I know that in your book Spun Into Gold, we'll talk about that then as well, and about your life story and your path and everything. But you'd work for BT, British Tel, is that right? Or were you Romany then or not?
I changed it while I was there. So while I was at university, we were just going into a recession. I didn't have any idea of being a performer because. Why would I,
Well, you knew you always wanted to do that since you were a little girl, obviously. That's always been a dream.
I totally did. But, as in the story, I put on weight when I was about 17. And so you couldn't be, I wanted to be a dancer. But I ended up, I don't know what 13 stone is in whatever it is, it's too big to be a dancer these days. So I gave up my dream of being a dancer or an actress, and I just went to university. And at the end of that, what people did is they tried to get a job on the fast track graduate schemes. So I did that, and I was picked to be sales and marketing, British Telecom. The salary was high. I got given a company car and training, and it was a good job, but it wasn't the job I wanted. But yes, you're right. Halfway through that, on my holidays, I went to a clown course. So I had a 2-week holiday and I did a 2-week clown course. But I do remember I was so naive at the age of 22 that in my breaks, I would go and pick up my messages. And of course, my business messages were like, the phone's gone down, the whole company is going, very, very stressful messages. And it was very stressful. And that really led to a phone phobia that I still have, because imagine if every time the phone rings, it's a company saying 100 lines are down. What are you going to do?
Right.
It's like, whoa. So even now when the phone rings, I don't like it.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because I was working in the energy business, and I was a financial trader, and I was on the phone all the time and had just lived with headphones on whenever I'm walking around talking with everybody and you're doing deals. But it was, I guess I was on the phone so much that I really don't like being on the phone much, which is kind of funny because here we are doing a podcast. Kind of over Skype.
Yeah, but we can see each other and we know each other.
That's true.
We know that we're friendly, and you aren't going to give me a problem. So the reason why I identified phone calls with problems was every time the phone rang, there was a big problem. And then, so I remember once I was the sales manager for pharmaceutical companies, which is crazy, isn't it? And given that, anyway, And they phoned, and their job was they had to provide emergency equipment to accident sites. So they ring me and they say 100 lines are down. We can't provide our emergency equipment. I say, okay. And I put the phone down, and then I ring BT, and they're like, it's Friday. There's no one around to help you. You know, this sort of thing, it's very frightening, and I'm so glad that I don't have to do anything like that anymore.
Yeah, because then people are going to be without service over the weekend just because it's a weekend and no one's there to work or whatever. It's not like...
It's my fault, you know. It's like, oh, I mean, the only thing I can relate with that is that an agent phoned 2 days ago, and he said, are you doing Zoom shows? And I said, well, I'm not really. He said, because I've got one for you tomorrow. I was like,
yeah.
And I said, listen, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. So then with BT, that you had kind of decided then that you had had a lot of enough stress, I guess, really, and you decided that was when that you wanted to start pursuing. I remember that, again, in the book, you had moved then from England to Germany, I guess, where that you did your first street performing, is that right? Or was it France?
Not quite yet. So basically, I didn't decide, I have to admit. I had a corporate job. And, you know, people who read the book will discover that I developed an eating disorder when I was 15. I was trying to be thin, to be a dancer. That sort of caused the eating disorder, bulimia. So in my early 20s, imagine I'm 23 years old. I'm in London. I'm working very hard for BT, but I've discovered salsa dancing. So I am dancing salsa all night till like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I auditioned to be one of the dancers for this salsa group. And so it was me and 2 other very thin Brazilian girls. So I was trying to be thin. So I was getting up in the morning. I had a personal trainer. I was working out in the gym. Then I'd go and work my stressful job. Then I'd go and dance all night, getting home at 3 in the morning. Of course, no one told me to sleep in my 20s. You know, I didn't know better. Something was going to give. And after, when all this stress and these health problems and not sleeping came together, one day, I had a big business meeting. I was in a hotel. I went to go to the business meeting, and I couldn't open the door from the inside. I couldn't work out. My brain had just gone. I couldn't work it out. And then I sat down and looked at the dressing room mirror, and I couldn't really see my face. And I was like, whoa, something's wrong. You know, I'm 23. I don't know what's wrong. I'm basically having a breakdown, I suppose. But then I went to my boss and said, I think I need a holiday. And I went off for a holiday, went to live with my parents or stay with my parents. And the moment I stopped, basically, I got complete agoraphobia. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't speak to anyone. I couldn't think straight. And it was in that time that I sat in my childhood bedroom and thought, what's happened? And I realized I didn't ever want a corporate job. All I ever wanted was to be on stage. Mm-hmm. All I wanted. But I'd followed everyone's advice to get a good job and all this, and a career and a university degree. And I thought, no. And I was angry. And I said, I'm going to be a performer no matter what. I don't care what it takes. I don't care about money. And that was the beginning.
But those are two polar opposite things, Romany, where you would have agoraphobia versus being on stage before thousands.
Sure. Yeah. But if you said to me, tomorrow you are going to be in Vegas on the stage with thousands of people, I'd be like, oh, wow. As long as it was material I knew, or even if you said, listen, you've got to be on stage and tell these people your life story. Fantastic. Not a problem. If you said, we want you to go to the shops today, I'd be like, oh, I don't really feel like going outside today. It's too much.
Because of the interaction with people and being in a larger crowd where that you're not the center of attention?
Really. No, not really. I can't really answer. It's just weird. And it's just weird. Often I struggle to leave the house. And yet if you were to say, talk to 1 million people, I'd be like, wow, okay, great.
Yeah.
And that's been like that, not my whole life, but since.
Do you think that might be part of bulimia? I know, again, in the book, what you're talking about is that you really are on a mission to let everybody know about this problem and this issue and how they should get through this. But do you think that that's part of it, in which that somebody, if you're bulimic, you don't have good self-esteem and you're afraid of getting out? I mean, I don't mean to sound like a therapist here.
No, I think one of the sentences I found in the book, which actually loads of people have repeated back to me, is is anxiety. Basically, the two go together. So when you get a lot of anxiety, which is sort of illogical, you're like, there's nothing wrong. I've got money in the bank. I'm sitting on my sofa, and yet I'm feeling really nervous for no reason at all. This is anxiety. When you have that, and when it gets into your brain and into, your body, it never really leaves you, and it flares up. For example, I'm great now. I'm really healthy, and I'm not scared, and I'm feeling very, very good. But I remember when I was cruising a lot, and I was doing long hauls, and I did 9 long haul, to Australia, to India, back every
And how many
week.
shows would you do on long haul like that?
Only 2.
Okay.
So you fly all the
2 45-minute shows or 20-minute? How long were the shows?
45-minute shows. So I would fly all the way to India, and maybe I'd do a night of 2 45-minute shows, followed by another night of 2 different 45-minute shows. And maybe I'd be on the boat for 10 days, and then I'd fly all the way back. And then a week later, I'd fly all the way to Australia or all the way to China. And I found after I had about 10 of those flights, I landed back in England, and I was a wreck. Not physically, but anxiety-wise. And all I could do, I remember, for 9 weeks is sit on the sofa and rest. And I was frustrated because I was like, there's nothing wrong. Everything's fine. And yet my body or my mental health responded to that stress. Now, you have to imagine when you're a cruise performer, you've got to make sure you've got everything. You've got all your props. My show is very intricate. It's got thousands of props, all of which can go wrong. And then you've got to get on time to the airport. You've got to get your baggage there. You've got to make sure it doesn't get left behind. You've also got to make sure that if your baggage did get left behind, you've got enough props on you, on your person, so that you can do a 45-minute show. And so I would travel with what's called a stuffer jacket. This is like a big padded jacket with lots of pockets. And in these pockets would be lots of my tricks for a 45-minute show. Now, if you've got to then get 3 planes to get to India and they've got a few connections, it's not calm and peaceful. And then when you get to the ship, you've got to do shows in front of people. So if you times all that stress by 10 times and the effect of long haul flights, I suppose it's not unusual that you might feel a little bit anxious by the end of it.
Well, certainly so. I've also heard many cruise ship magicians who have said that we're not being paid to actually perform, but actually to travel because most of it's on the plane.
Yeah, we love being on stage.
Yeah.
We love that, don't we? But everything else, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's just the heartache and the worry about that, about getting your props there properly and everything. That I remember they had told me to fly to Alexandria one time and catch a ship to go and do something, and I know what you mean. And that making sure that everything's there. And way back then, I was doing the bowling ball production. I got rid of that after a while because I was thinking that's just one thing that I can do. The 60 seconds. It was a lot of weight, and it's ridiculous.
With a bowling ball.
Bowling ball prediction, the Kevin James bowling ball.
Yeah, no, but I always thought that people would maybe ask their friends to bring them a bowling ball or something.
I travel with a light one, like a 9-pound ball. Got rid of that after a while. Particularly whenever I was on the ship one time, and there were a couple of guys who were twins that played the violin, and they were really good, and they did some music also for Disney and the movies and things like that. And when they showed up, basically that they had just a little suitcase that had a tuxedo in it, I think, and their toiletries and the violin. And it's like I had all this stuff, and it's like, oh, and those guys killed. I need to really scale down.
There was a woman, I can't remember her name, but she played the stride piano, which is jazz piano, and she had one dress, and she played the piano. And she didn't have any music because she just played solo. Yeah, she had a handbag with her. I was, yeah. I mean,
she obviously didn't travel with the piano. The piano was provided wherever she would go. Yeah.
I used to travel with 60 kilos. And,
wow.
Yeah, and in the end, my elbows were going.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you, by the way, we were talking, you just kind of alluded to earlier, as far as the setup and getting ready for your show, because I know all of the, not only the flowers and the way you have to keep these things pristine so they're not pressed and so that way they look fresh and everything, as well as the clothing that's not wrinkled and everything, the costumes and the background. When you call the Diva of Magic, I think that's a very appropriate title, certainly, of everything that you're putting together. How long does it take you, actually, to put together the show before, a show, before that you would walk out to do a 45-minute show? What's your preparation time? Even though that you've got everything together, you unpack it, what's your setup time?
Okay, so if I've got it all packed from the suitcase, that's the wonderful thing about cruise ships. You get there at 8 o'clock in the morning and I've got the dressing room all to myself.
Yeah.
It takes me about 2 hours to put everything out, and that's my happiest time. I usually put music on and I've got all day, so I'm not stressed. And I lay it all out. And I love the fact that the dressing room goes from empty to then my world of pink and feathers and the costumes hanging up. But about 2 hours. And then afterwards, of course, it takes about 2 hours to put back again. And people always say, oh, should we see you in the bar after the show? I'm like, no. And then once I thought, all right, because actually someone really sort of bullied me into it, and I went. And then we all had a drink. I don't really drink, but we had one drink or two.
But were you in costume?
No, take that off.
Yeah.
I had put a dress on. But then I realised it was now 2 o'clock in the morning, and now I've got 2 hours of packing. So Jeff McBride says, pack then party.
Right.
It's really clever.
Well, in that case, like in yours, that if it takes 2 hours, by the time you get to the party, those people are 3 sheets to the wind.
Well, then they've probably gone to bed.
Or else they're gone.
You know what? My favourite thing on a cruise ship is that I've done 2 shows. I've been, stressed all day or whatever, and I'm exhausted. And so I pack down for 2 hours, usually listening to a podcast or just music, usually listening to a podcast. And I've got my own little world, and hopefully the show's gone well and I'm quite happy. And once I've got everything, I then go back to my suite and I run a bath and I put in bubble bath or whatever the ship's got. And then I listen to more BBC Radio 4 because it's really rock and roll in my suite. And that is my favourite, and have a cup of tea. And there I am in my bath, and that is my favourite place. And so no party on earth is going to be better.
So you just kind of unwind that way and then think through your show. Do you record your show that you can watch back or listen later, or just turn on your microphone for your phone or something?
I used to. When I was in Dubai, for 90 shows, and I filmed every single show and watched every single show back. I have stopped doing that now. I probably should, but I've got a bit lazy.
Another thing I wanted to know, and I always like to talk with stage performers about their jitters they have before a show. And I know that one of the brilliant things that Jeff McBride had said is that every magician has butterflies. It's just a matter of having them fly in formation. Try to get them so this way that you're all going to be going the same way. And before the show, that I know that it seems like everything's going everywhere. What do you do to try to calm down before you open the curtains and here is Romany?
Yeah. I really like to have a long time to prepare, which sometimes you can't. On land, you often can't, can you? And on land, you often don't have enough space to prepare.
That's true.
But on a ship, it's fantastic. So I get there really early, put it all out. I've prepared in the past, so I know my script and I know the show. So it's not as if it's a new show. But then I really rest all day. I rest all day. In the afternoon, I'll sleep for 3 hours, like from 2 till 5 or something. And then I'll get there super early, and I am in costume at least an hour before it starts. And then the great Bob Fitch, I went to Bob Fitch for direction, and he said he didn't understand why magicians left it to the last minute to load everything and check everything. He said you should be absolutely loaded and stage ready 45 minutes before you step on stage. Because and I've done this, if you're ready 45 minutes before you step on stage, then you have time to do your visualization work. So, for example, you can visualize that the audience has a great time. You can, I do this funny thing, and I've been doing it forever. I sort of made it up myself. And I don't care if you think I'm nuts, but I imagine light coming through the top of my head and going down to my heart and mixing with my heart, and then it goes out like light rays, and for me they're like magenta light rays, and it goes right to the back of the audience, and there's this beautiful haze of magenta light rays of love, and I just imagine that there, and I stand there like that. Now, funnily enough, my husband is a big Buddhist, and guess what? They do the same thing. But I have to say, I made my own thing up. But they do the same thing. And then the other thing is, as Bob says, you can do voice. I do voice, exercises. Whenever the weather is good, whenever the weather is not. We'll weather the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. And all these tongue twisters and voice exercises to make sure that your voice is ready. And then Bob Also taught me breathing exercises to get your lungs and your diaphragm warmed up. So that's what I do in 45 minutes. And also, I learnt my lesson. I've got about 45 things stored or loaded on me before I walk out.
Holy moly. Wow.
Right? I've got 5 bird cages hidden. Are we magicians listening here?
Oh, yeah. Exclusively, yes.
Because for the rest of you, it's real magic.
Yeah.
So I've got 5 bird cages in my skirt, which weighs like 7 kilos. I've got a balloon and a balloon popper and a spare balloon and a spare balloon popper, and I've got a feather cane, and God knows I've got 4 coins, and I've got loads of stuff on my body. The feather decane is loaded in my hat, and because of my initial act where I'm producing things, I learned very early on, because you have to make, say, a birdcage appear, you've got to have it just right. It can't appear by itself. It can't be too easy to appear, and it can't be too hard to appear. So it's got to have that perfect balance, which means that if I walk, then things are probably going to pop out. So I go and stand as near as I can to the stage 15 minutes before the show starts. And I stand there and I just sort of send love to the audience. And also the other thing I do is, which might sound a bit weird, I think, what if this was my last show? What if I was, I don't know, to fall off the side of the ship or something, and this was my last show? I'd better enjoy it. And also, what if this was the last show of the people in the audience? Because, you know, there's quite a few old people.
Think about Tommy Cooper.
Right.
Dying on stage, right.
So what if this was their last show that they ever saw? So I think, okay, and that makes me forget my fears, because if this was my last show, then I'm going to do the best I can. And if this is their last show, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm not going to hold anything back. And I found that really helpful. And the other thing I do is I pretend that I'm on Broadway. So as you know, I always had this dream of being on Broadway, which my very good friend Paul DeBeck of The Illusionists has done so it's possible. So I think, what if this was my Broadway show? Wow. Then go and do your Broadway show. And the first time I ever did that, I was in a hotel. I was at a dance weekend where the deal was I got a free dance weekend because I like swing dancing. Free dance weekend. Oh, I got paid a bit. But on Sunday, I was going to surprise everyone and do my magic show. And they didn't know I was a magician. And so it was a really kooky setup. There wasn't a stage. It was just in the back of a hotel. And I thought, I'm going to imagine this as Broadway. And I did. And I got a couple of standing ovations. You know, because I think if you imagine it, then they will imagine it. Just like magic. If we imagine that something is real when we produce it, then the audience will understand the same thing.
You have to have the conviction for the audience to be convinced.
Right. Because haven't you found that if I remember when I was doing close-up, if I got tired towards the end of the gig and I was like a bit fed up, the magic didn't work anymore. The people didn't believe it because I didn't believe it, which is really interesting.
Yeah. I remember working at the Magic Island with a well-known magician one time, and we were standing on the in the wings, and they were introducing him, and as he was coming on, he was turned to me and said, well, time to mail in another one. And he still had a lot of energy, but in the back of his mind, he was just mailing it in because he had done it thousands of times, and he was at the age where that he could still kind of keep it fresh and from the audience perspective, but in his mind, he was mailing it in. He still didn't have that mindset of, I'm going to be giving them the best show, better than the last one I've done, and I've done thousands, kind of a thing. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So I think he could have been even better if he would have had that mindset of taking that mailing it in out of his vocabulary even, you know.
Definitely. Yeah. I think we are so lucky to do the job we do. It's incredible. And, you know, so I didn't ever think I was going to be a performer. I had a corporate job, and yet I got the opportunity to be a performer. Yeah. I'll never, ever underestimate that.
Another thing, too, you were referring really to working in ideal situations where we would have a dressing room in a cruise ship and everything, but a lot of us performers are doing corporate shows and working in hotels and country clubs or other kinds of places in which that you're lucky if you have a bathroom to change in. So usually I bring my own curtains and I'll get changed or do whatever back behind there. And so oftentimes, of course, they will ask you, would you like to have dinner with us? You want to sit at the main table or whatever, which I never do, for a variety of reasons, because they're always asking you questions. How'd you get started? You don't get to eat. You're just talking to people. And also, I think you're kind of spoiling it, because you should be the surprise. Whenever they introduce you, it's like, wow, here's the guy, as opposed to wonder what he's going to be like. And so they've kind of judged you before you come out, if you've already been sitting there at the dais with the rest of the people, But anyhow, my question was that, do you do those kinds of shows, and how is your preparation for that when you really have to stand someplace and be prepared well in advance?
Yeah. I mean, we've all done those shows. I mean, I can see them in my mind's eye. And one of them is the not the Magic Convention, because that's usually in a theatre, but the Magic Dinner, the Magic Society dinner.
Yes.
Do you have those in America?
We do. We do have our banquets and things, annual installation of officer banquets and things like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in England, we have quite a few big magic societies, and they have dinners, and they bring the public. So it's not just magicians.
Yes, we do too as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they're usually held in the hotels. And so, yes, I'm in the back room, probably with all the chairs and tables stacked. Mm-hmm. You just find yourself a table and you make do.
Right.
I like that because what I really like is the front and the back view. So you get the glitz and the glamour, and then you've got the packing and the travelling and the same. In England, you'll go to this really ritzy joint, and you go to the back. And I just think it's really interesting. Mm-hmm. Again, I was a street performer. So, you're lucky if you change in the car park.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
But the other thing I do have, I have the Diva-mobile. So I bought myself a camper van, a nice...
A Diva-mobile. Okay. Yeah. This reminds me kind of like the Pope-mobile. I was just thinking, so you got a Diva-mobile. I got to see, what kind of a vehicle is this?
So it's a VW Transformer. 2004, which were the good years.
Oh, I was thinking of a completely different kind of a toy that's a transformer into. Okay.
No,
for the movies.
Which was a really nice camper van, and the reason I did that was I was going up and down the motorway. I had a Saab or something silly, and I was not sleeping in my car, but when you're going up the motorway and you get too tired and you just have to pull over.
Pull over, sure. Yeah, well, yeah.
And then you wake up really cramped, and then you get a cold the next day, and it's just miserable. And I had pulled into a motorway service station on my own at 2:00 in the morning, and I was eating a stale piece of chocolate cake, and I was miserable. And I was like, I am not enjoying this. And I thought, well, what would change it? And I thought, well, if I had a camper van, then I wouldn't need to come in for a stale piece of chocolate cake, and I could do what I do, which is pull up in the car park and make my own nice coffee on my little kitchen, have own food in the fridge, listen to my favourite Radio 4 BBC as I'm listening, have a sleep if I'm tired, pull over and sleep till 6:00 in the morning if I need to before I carry on. And also, I perform for rich people, say, don't we all? And maybe it's in their house. And you don't always want to be in their house because it's a bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So I have my own dressing room. I'd put the roof up, and if I have to get there at 4:00 for an 8:00 start, I can get there early, tech, and then I can have a little nap in my van and eat my own food, which is like important on the road, isn't it?
Sure.
And have a sleep. And that had made all the difference. And I've had that since 2008.
Banachek used to do the same thing years ago when he was working on the college circuit, and they would usually put him up in hotels and whatnot, but then he was driving. A lot of times the colleges would be within driving distance rather than flying in or whatever and then picking you up and whatnot. So he was on the road a lot and did the same thing, in which he had a camper van where he could pull over and sleep and have his own kind of a thing, because it's certainly easier and cheaper than trying to find a motel someplace along the way. And whenever you get tired, as you say, a lot of times after the show, of course, we're up and ready to go, and it takes a while to get your show put together, and you got to be someplace else. You might as well drive a few hours tonight while you're wired,
Exactly. You drive, you finish at 11 or something, and you drive till 3, and then you have a good sleep, and then you can get up at 7:00 in the morning again, and off you go, and then you're home earlier. It's just really civilized. It totally changed my working life. Really good idea.
But it always fascinated me, and this is just a perspective on England in general, that people don't tend to drive very far. They think that it's a long distance. I remember driving from Cardiff to Dover in a day, and they said, "You're doing that in a day?" And so I was like, "Yeah," or I was going to be driving from Aberdeen to London in a day, and it's like, "You're crazy," and people just don't do that in England.
No, they don't. But you've got a much bigger country than we have.
Well, that's true. I mean, England's the size of one of our states,
Right. But for me, I mean, I now live 7 hours from London, so that would be a long drive, I think. I think 3 hours is good. Yeah, 7 is a long way. Yeah.
Yeah. It would be. Yeah, you say you're living north of Blackpool.
Yeah, so I'm living in...
Because Manchester and Blackpool are kind of on the same latitudes. You're north of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm under Scotland, and that's wonderful. I've realised that this one, it's now I've called it the Magic Cottage. It's not its official name. And I can stick a piece of paper over its official name, and the postman won't notice. And I'm in this little magic cottage, and it's like I'm realising it's like a little TV recording studio. It's so picturesque. And, you know, I've got my ring light and I've got the different lighting and it's just perfect. It's quiet. There's nobody here. It's fantastic.
You call it the Magic Cottage?
I just did because, you know, I write for Alan Watson's Easy. And so I just started saying hello from the Magic Cottage. Now, my last house was called the Secret Palace of Dreams. I just think it's funny to call your house whatever you want to.
You'll never guess what the name of my house. My house has a name.
What is it?
Mystic Haven.
Wow. See? I think we should all... I was hiking and we went past his house and it said, "Ye old breasty whore." No, it didn't say. It was "old breasty whore." But they had said it. But if you read it, you wouldn't realise that the sound of it was "old breasty whore." Because it was AUD. And that, you know, but someone was obviously having a joke. Yeah. And so imagine if you were telling the bank what your address was. It's like, "My name is Romany and the old whore." I think that's funny.
So did the postman know the home's name, so you don't have to have necessarily an address? So if I said Mystic Haven, they would know that's where to go.
Yeah, I don't have a number. My cottage is called Breezewood, and it's got a big sign on the little door made out of rock.
Yeah.
It's chiseled rock, and it says Breezewood. So I'm in a village. There's not many houses.
Interesting. I did not know that. Well, I learned a little something there then as well. So the book, by the way, which is Spun Into Gold, that you had decided at what point in your life or career and why you even wanted to do this crazy thing, because I've worked with Banachek and others writing books, and I know the process that you have to go through and publishing and all of that. So
I didn't decide. I didn't do it.
The universe decided for you, basically.
Yeah, I did not have any intention to do that, and I had no idea. As the book business is not even a business. You get like $1 a book or something stupid for such a lot of work. So if you're going to do it, only do it for love. It was in August, and I was at home, and I was working on the Chinese sticks. I'd got the Chinese sticks, a pair of Kavari's Chinese sticks, which are great because they've got the really long thread, and I'm at home practicing. People might think you don't need to practice the Chinese sticks, but I do. So, and my Facebook feed is full of pictures of my friends on the beach because it's August, and I'm like, I'm feeling resentful. I'm feeling about 5 years old. I'm not allowed to go out. And I said to my friend, "It's not fair. I've got to do this stupid magic where I make things disappear and appear and disappear and appear." And he said, "What would you do if you weren't doing magic?" And I said, out of my mouth, I didn't think before I spoke. I just said, "I'd like to be writing. I'd like to get up in the morning and I'd like to write all day. And that's what I'd like to do." And then I sort of thought, "Hey, who said that?" And he said, "Well, why don't you? What's stopping you?" And I said, "Well, no one cares what I write. No one's going to pay me to write." And then we changed the subject. Then what was weird, I went immediately out to buy some vegetables, and I went past a shop that had a book in it that said Big Magic. And of course, I'm a magician, so I looked at it, and it was as if it had a buy me sign on it. And I just went in and I bought it, popped it in my panniers, cycled home, made a cup of tea and started reading it. Big Magic is by Elizabeth Gilbert, and it's a book to anyone to write your book, be a magician, be a painter, whatever it is in your heart to do. Don't think I'm too old, I'm too stupid, I've got a mortgage. Do it because it's important. It's a call to arms for artists. And so I read that till 2 a.m, the whole thing, and I got up and started writing. And I didn't stop. I did not stop for 5 months. I wrote 10 hours a day.
Wow.
It was August, so that was a very slow time for gigs. But I didn't go and get any more gigs. I did them if I had them. But apart from that, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and wrote as long as I could until it was finished. And then it was Christmas, and I was like, oh, I haven't practiced for 5. I haven't, and so I had to get back to work. And so I got back to work and put it aside. And well, it's a cosmic story of how it got finished, but which people have to read it themselves. But we have talked about how I talk about my eating disorder in there. I wasn't going to. I had kept that eating disorder secret from everybody forever, apart from about 5 people. It's not the sort of thing to talk about. No one talks. Well, people do a bit more these days, but they didn't used to.
Yeah.
It's naturally a thing you don't really want to tell people about. But that week, Daryl had hung himself in the castle. And I was very upset about that. I didn't know Daryl well, but I'd learned his tricks and I'd seen him online. And I looked at that story of a wonderful entertainer making everyone happy for a week. And then this happens. And I thought, I can't bear it. I have to help raise awareness of mental health. I have to help people struggling. I'm 50. I'm well now. If I can help a few people by telling my truth and also explaining how I got better and how I found a way to create a happy life, then that's worth it. And I think what's the use of a memoir if it's not honest? But I just decided that I don't care what people say to me. Something needs to be done. And the other thing that really changed my mind, there's an author, really read by women probably, but maybe not your listeners, called Caitlin Moran. She's a British feminist. And she said that when she does book readings, lots of young women come up to talk to her afterwards, but they're either very thin or plump, or they've got their sleeves covering their arms where they've been cutting themselves.
Yeah.
And I still can't bear the idea of that, because maybe when I was young it wasn't that bad and it's got much worse. Can't bear it. So if I can do anything to help, then they can have my time and my effort, because that's a cause I'm standing behind now.
Now, your book came out initially when? When was it?
Now in April. Yeah.
April of what year?
2018.
Yeah. And since then, you have, I know that you, in addition to do magic, are a speaker then as well, and I assume that you talk about bulimia.
Yeah, I do, because it's part of the story. But it's also, my talk is about the magical power of persistence, i.e., my concept is that if you have a wish or a desire, even if it takes a long time, as long as you keep going towards it, sooner or later, it will happen. So, for example, I say to my audience that when I gave up my job, I was 26. And then when I won the World Magic Awards in Las Vegas, I was 43, which if you count all your fingers and all your toes, makes 17 years of persistence. And really, I didn't get a good act quickly, mainly because I was struggling with my mental health and bulimia. So it was very difficult. But
were you talking to a therapist? Were you trying to handle this yourself?
No, I went to all the therapists. I don't think they work very well. It didn't work for me. In the end, the only thing that worked for me, and this is what I want to teach people, is that is a coping strategy. Whether you're an alcoholic or anything that you're struggling with, it's a coping strategy because you're unhappy. You don't have these problems if you're having the time of your life. You just don't. So you have to try and get happier. You can't get there from here. What I mean is you can't get to happy from unhappy. You just can't. You can't get to happy from depressed. The only way that you can get a little bit better is by seeking a bit of a better feeling. So, for example, say I'm here in my cottage and I'm like, I'm doing all this work and nothing's working. The only thing I might be able to do is maybe put on some really good music. Some Bobby Day I've been listening to, this rocking guy. And I put on this music and I start dancing in my living room and I feel a bit better. And that gives me a bit more energy. And then you can feel a bit better and a bit better and a bit better. And once you start to look for the joy in life and feel better, you don't need the coping strategies that you had. And that's, for me, that's the only way out.
So you think that some people are just not looking for that joy? They just would rather continue to keep that into themselves, and they look inward and don't try and find happiness?
I don't think anyone chooses to be unhappy. I think you don't know how to be joyful. When I say joyful, that's even a big of a strong word. I'm talking about if you're feeling down, you have to go very gently to just feel a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and get that to be a habit. So, for example, I used to wake up in the morning, every morning, and my default was, oh no, I'm too fat, which sounds crazy now to me now, but it was for 20 years. And then in my day, I'd then exercise for 3 hours, and then I'd control my food, and I'd have the whole of my brain caught up with this nonsense and this unhappy business. So for the last 10 years, I wake up in the morning and I'd have the default thing. And I go, oh, no, you don't want that. You want to go back and you use gratitude. So you go back and you go, no, I'm not starting the day with that. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go, wow, I've got a pillow. My duvet is really comfortable. My bed's really comfortable. I've had a good night's sleep. The sun has come up. There is a window. Whatever nonsense you can think to go, not nonsense, but to go, look, my fingers are working. I've lived through the night.
To be thankful for what it is that, yeah.
And you do that until until you're feeling good. And only then you get up. And I've made that an absolute habit. And then in the daytime, if I do get discouraged or down in any way, I have another exercise where it's silly, but it works. I call it I am delighted by. So I go, I am delighted by I've got a ring light. I'm delighted by I'm talking to Scott Wells. I'm delighted that I've got a computer. I'm delighted that I've got feet. I've got a carpet. I'm delighted I have floorboards. I'm delighted I have loads of doors in my house. I'm delighted I can breathe. I'm delighted my lungs work. And you keep doing that, and it has to lift your spirits. So even if you are depressed, and of course there's people with illnesses, and life is not fair. People die, people are ill. Life can suck. But what are you going to do? You can either stay where you are and feel worse, or you can try and feel a bit better. You know, it's a very, very gentle thing. I certainly wouldn't tell anyone that's feeling awful, who's lost their job, who's lost their children, to feel better. That's very callous. But I would encourage them to use a few techniques.
But you're making 35,000 choices a day, whether you're going to be going left or right or up or down or however whatever. And I think the more choices that you make that would lead you to joy and happiness and thankfulness would be the correct direction.
Yeah, it's good for you. It's a bit like, are you going to clean your teeth in the morning?
Right.
You know, if you don't, one day is a week is and after a month your teeth are going to fall out. You know, so what choices do you make? And I think like mental health hygiene, which is gratitude and doing little exercises to make you feel better and happier and make yourself laugh, is a really good idea. Yeah. And something I'd like to teach young people, because no one taught me that. Like I had to get to like 46 before I learned these things. You know, I'd like to teach people that.
So have you been going in, when you are a speaker, have you been going into schools in particular? Is that who you're trying to direct your talks to? Or?
I mean, this is all pretty new to me. And so in the last 2 years, I was too busy doing cruise ships. So I was very busy doing shows.
Sure.
So it's only recently that I've thought about speaking and doing that. So now I've been doing a lot of online stuff and talking to women's groups and schools, and I'm going to do loads more.
But talking to women's groups and going out and talking to fraternal organizations and everything, those are people who are already at a particular point in their life that are into maturity or pretty mature, and either they have those problems already, or they've already gone through them, or whatever. That the people that you need to be talking to, obviously, those who are in the middle of it or beginning of it, and like they're questioning themselves, children in particular.
Plan. And my very good friend who's helping me with my marketing at the moment, she's an amazing singer-songwriter. But, you know, she's 5 foot and she's not thin, and she's struggled with food her whole life. And so the pair of us are skilled entertainers, and the pair of us have had fantastic lives of entertainment. And so we want to go in together, you know, and tell these young women that you don't have to be a stick thin and pretty and a certain size or shape.
Society seems to be telling young ladies that is the way, the stereotypical way that people should look, women should look.
Yeah, and you look at all the plastic stuff all the time now.
Oh, yeah. I can't stand that.
I know, my friend is a Botox nurse, and most of her clients are 30-year-olds or 20-year-olds. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it will be fantastic to go into schools and to perform for them. You know, my friend will sing, I'll do magic, which is wonderful because we did a show together once, and she went out first and sang. And what I noticed was that music opens the heart. And then when people are watching music, she's got a beautiful singer. She sings like Ella Fitzgerald, and she plays as well. So people are watching her and their heart is open. And then I go in and with magic because their heart is open, and then they're more ready for a message of wonder or whatever it is I'm saying. So, yeah. So we're going to do that together, and we're applying for funding now.
And then afterwards, then you would give your message, or is it in between the two of you, or when do they?
Between. I mean, I really love telling people this power of persistence, because I've got so many stories where I haven't given up, you know, and it might have taken a long while, but wonderful circumstances that you couldn't have thought possible have come into place to make what I wanted to happen, but also in a weird twisty way that I couldn't have seen possible. So I want to tell them as well to have a dream and walk towards it. Take action. I love this GPS analogy. You know, so for example, I want to go to London, and you're in your car, and I program in London. But unless I put the clutch down and start the engine and move, the GPS can't tell me where to go. Mm-hmm. So if I go wrong, it will say make a U-turn, go the other way. But if I don't move, I might have a dream, but if I don't take any action, I won't get any guidance. And I found it, like, for example, this week when I thought all my ships had come in, and the BBC invited me to be on the BBC, the first magician ever it's a flagship arts program. And I was like, wow, I've manifested a chance to tell everyone about my book. That's fantastic. And I asked the presenter on air if she would read my book. And she said, yes, she had to, obviously. And in the morning, I wrote to the producer and said, wouldn't it be amazing if a magician who had this idea, the presenter read their book and invited them on. And as a consequence of that, all these young women were helped. All these parents with troublesome teenagers were helped. And the book span into millions of readers. Wouldn't that be amazing? And that you helped this artist. And I sent him this email. And then he sent one back saying, the producers were very uncomfortable that I had asked the presenter on air to read the book, and that by doing so, I had meant there was no time to talk about how magicians were struggling, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. They had another agenda, something they wanted to talk about, and you were trying to take it into a more positive direction.
I was, but that is a fantastic no, because this idea is that every no leads to yes. So by them saying, no, we don't want to do that for you, I was like, right. It took me a day of being a bit embarrassed and a bit like, oh, that was embarrassing. But then the next day I was like, okay, I need to have my own power. I need to have my own channel to broadcast. I need to not be reliant on the BBC with their own agenda. They're subsidized by the government. So, and then it was our good friend Tim Wise called me and said, I've got this thing called Abra TV. You can have your own channel. You can put your book on it. You can sell your audio book on it. You can put your podcasts and interviews that you want to do. And the other thing I was like, right, I am going to interview, like you're doing, Scott. Yes. I'm going to interview all the artists that I know who are not lying down, who are continuing to inspire the world. I'm going to interview them and tell the world about them. And I can put it all on my channel.
That's a great idea.
Right. So suddenly I have more work and more things to do than I know what to do with. But that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had the courage to ask, and if the BBC hadn't said no.
That could have gone in a completely different direction had they say yes and you were doing that, and then it would have been done with that and then gone on to something else. So you never know what kind of windows will open.
No, exactly.
When a door's closed.
I love that. That's what I love about magic. I would say that is magic. Magic is just knowing what's going to happen next. I put the intention out there, and I'm prepared to walk any old way towards it. I'm not quite sure how to get there.
Right.
But then
Well, as Johnny Walkabout would say, being a Buddhist, would be that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
Exactly.
You know?
Who said Buddha, probably.
Maybe.
I think it's so funny. So this weekend, I'm doing the Jeff McBride mystery weekend, and he's doing some sort of spiritual thingy all day. So he's going to be in his room in the monastery, and I'm going to be in the magic cottage. And so you've got the magician and the Buddhist, and we both agree that everything is illusion.
Yeah. One last thing that I wanted to bring up, and that is our mutual and dear departed friend of Eugene Berger, and I know that you were close with him then as well. What were some words of wisdom that you were living with? I know that he had dropped numerous gems, but what kind of sticks with you?
Well, the first thing he didn't say it to me, he said it in a lecture, and this was the first magic lecture I think I ever saw at FISM in Dresden, and he said, when you go and see a Dolly Parton concert, she will sing of the good times and the bad times. You will laugh and you will cry and you will be interested. As magicians, we should take people on an emotional journey in our show. So that's one thing. Because, I just think we're funny all the time, but actually, maybe we're going to tell a serious story. Maybe we're going to do something that's heart-wrenching, and then maybe we're going to go back to magic.
Much like what you're doing with the bulimia and talking with people about this.
Yeah,
it's very serious.
I tell you all about when people threw beer cans at me in Glastonbury and all the stupid things I did. But at the same time, let's do something good here as well. The other thing he really taught was get a script. He said, how can you adjust your pauses or your timings or anything if you don't have a script? And I've always loved words, and I was never very good at actual magic, And so I really tinkered with my script all the time. And the other thing he said to me personally, he said, Romany, you're an actress. And I was like, I'm not an actress. He said, you're an actress. Use that power on stage or something like that. But whatever it was, he was so positive and always, always supportive. Yeah.
He was quite a guy and quite an inspiration to so many that have left an indelible mark that will live long beyond his years. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Yeah. Well, listen, the name of my podcast is called The Magic Word Podcast, and I always like to close by asking my guests what it is that is their philosophy of life, and there are so many different things we've talked about over here and things that you got in your book that I would imagine that come to mind, but also when I talk with people, they say, well, today it's this. Yesterday it might have been this, but it's how I'm feeling right now, or whatever. But is there something that is like your magical mantra or your chi? Oh. What is it that you...
Well, I mean, when you were talking, the word that was in my mind was encourage, because that's what is in my heart right now. For the rest of my life, I think I want to encourage everyone. Mm-hmm. But if you look at that word, encourage, it's like encourage, go forward. Take your courage and go forward. And with that, I love the phrase, I can and I will, watch me. Right? Because lots of people, when I first said I'm going to be a juggler and I'm going to be a magician, people are like, huh? And when I've said I'm going to Spun Into Gold to millions of readers, so it's translated into all different languages all over the world, people are like, huh? I'm like, I can and I will, watch me.
Right.
Right?
That's great. That's right.
And it doesn't matter, because the moment you achieve something, that is unimportant, and then you want to do something else. But you want to do something with your time. It's like a big game. So choose something and get behind it.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, choose something and get behind it, because I think doing nothing is not a choice.
No.
That's just giving up, and you've got to move forward and do something, right or wrong, but don't be indifferent. Take a position.
It doesn't really matter what you do. I just think you've got to do something with your heart, and the more you put into it, the more you get back, the more fun it is. So What I'm doing at the moment is the collaboration with people that, we wouldn't be talking if I hadn't have made that wish. And now you're going to be a friend for life.
Right.
Well, that's fantastic. So forget how many books are sold. I now know you, and I now know all these people, and it's fun.
Right.
Life has got to be fun.
Yeah, the direction that this has put us on would not have been envisioned without that. That's true. Well, to close and wrap up, that I want you to just kind of pitch the couple of places where people can go to the Abra TV, and also because you can listen to this through Audible.com and Amazon and whatnot for the book. But go ahead, pitch it.
Oh, that's right. So now that I've got my own channel, so go to Abra TV and look for Romany. I can't remember what channel I am, but that's pretty easy.
Is it Abra.tv or?
Yeah, Abra.tv. And look for Romany. And on my site, I haven't actually managed to upload much. So the only thing that's uploaded really is my audiobook, which you can buy. I think it's $12.99. The book will be on Amazon everywhere around the world. If you're in Australia or somewhere that Amazon don't really deliver to, then Book Depository is the best way to get it because it's got free shipping. Book Depository belongs to Amazon anyway. And if you're an e-reader book, if you've got a Kindle, then you can go straight to my site, which is romanymagic.com shop. And the ebook is downloaded, and then we won't give Amazon any money at all.
And you make more money yourself on that. That's great.
Yeah.
Good. Romany, this has been just an amazingly fast hour. As I just kind of looked at the clock over here, that I could just sit and chat with you all day long, and I look forward to seeing you in the real, since that we are conversing right now over Skype and seeing each other. That I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Yeah, fantastic. Let's do it.
Great. And so for the Magic Word Podcast, that was Romany. This is Scotty out. Well, thank you, Romany, very much for being my guest here this week, and also thanks for inspiring, hopefully, many people who will be listening to this podcast, that they will pass this on, perhaps that they may have a family member who might be suffering from bulimia, and they might suggest that they share this with them, and perhaps it might change their life and their direction in a positive way. So thank you for the book that you have written, and also thank you for offering the books as a gift to some of our listeners. In that regard, let me just say that if you just go to themagicwordpodcast.com to this week's episode, number 592, you will see a form there that you can complete and just put in your name and your email address, and you're entered in the contest automatically. We will let this run for about 2 weeks, and because it is an ebook that she's going to be giving away, that means that it's going to be available for everyone internationally, since there's no postage or anything, and that could be sent very easily. So regardless where you live, you can enter as long as it's legal and that you are allowed by law to enter into a game of chance. But that's what this is. Your name could be randomly drawn, and there will not be one or two, but there will actually be 3 ebooks that are being offered as prizes. So there'll be 3 winners, names that will be drawn. So thank you again, Romany, for offering those prizes. That's a great way of kicking off 2021 or 2021, however you want to term it. Well, one last thing that I want to leave you with, and that is that during this past year, we have had certainly a difficult time, not just with COVID, but because of the people who have passed, who have been important in our lives, a lot of magicians who have passed on. And I want to recommend again that you go to the Magic Word Podcast, to this week's episode. And there I have put out a list. It's not an exhaustive list of everyone who has passed, and I may have left out some names. And if so, then I would like for you just to go ahead and put the names in the comments section on the podcast website, if you would. But we have had an extremely bad year. And again, not just because of COVID. There were only a few who were on the list who had passed because of that, but others who have left us, whether that it's been from Roy Walton to Walter Zaney Blaney, Bev Bergeron. We've lost others, Norm Nielsen and Marvin Roy, and so many others that if you go back, you might be amazed as to how many people that we have lost, and you might have even have forgotten that these people had passed on as this year has worn on. So just want to take some time and think about these people who have influenced our lives in so many ways and have made this wonderful community of ours so rich with great magic, with great friendship, and their and their lives will live on through the magic that we perform and also with the stories that we tell about them. Many of these people who have passed on have been guests on this podcast, and you can go back and listen to some of those people talk. And in fact, when you go back to episode 592, some of the names, if you will just click on that hot link, it will take you then to the episodes where we have spoken with some of those who have passed. So until we meet again, aloha, my friends. So until next week and next year, stay well, get booked, and remember to always choose something and just get behind it and move forward. Good advice for 2021. Happy New Year, everyone. This is Scotty out.